Welcome to the Patriarchy podcast, where Christian husbands become respected leaders. And today we're talking about how to shape and sustain a shared story in your marriage so that your spouse can feel excited to be part of that. So, what's the marriage crisis currently?
Thanks, Will. It's a bit of a medley of things, and I would say that the way I envision our talk is almost kind of an oil check for the marriage or a maintenance check because there's always the next crisis around the corner. But thankfully, we've been in a fairly okay, pretty good streak lately. So I'm trying to prognosticate, trying to look ahead, anticipate some of the problems that might crop up. And I think one of the main ones I've been experiencing a little bit of a tension point for me has been kind of how we spend our free time together. Um, Now, it hasn't been as much of an issue lately because currently we're on vacation doing some traveling, so things are actually pretty fresh and new right now. But otherwise, there's some variables that come into play in our day-to-day life that make it kind of a bit stale. Our evening times together, which is when we usually in the day I'm working. She's a stay-at-home mom, so she stays at home. She's got a kid in the way, but right now it's mostly just chores that she has on her mind. And that eventually runs dry, and so she probably feels a little bit bored currently. And then when I get home, due to a few things that I hopefully will outline for you right now, we don't always have that much to do that I think is fun and also affordable on a day-to-day basis. So maybe it'll help. So that would be the first thing would be how to not make sure that the relationship itself is not stagnating. Make sure that the time we're spending together is valued by her and is just objectively valuable and not just me bumbling around the house and sort of turning into some version of her what would you say, butler, or trying to give her foot rubs, which all that that eventually gets old. So I want to keep things exciting, keep things fresh, and make her associate me with something positive and energetic and not boring, not stagnant. I think it might be helpful if it's okay to sort of jot down some of the factors I think are contributing to that, and sort of share them with you right now. So the big thing to know is, other than that, we've been married for 7 months now. We've only really known each other for a year. I proposed after the third date. But the big factor is that we both moved together. We made the jump to move to China. So that's where I've been working. That's where we've been based at. And and unfortunately, there's been a whole bunch of factors that came into that. She got pregnant, and she got hit with a very serious morning sickness. So for the prior month and a half or so, she's just been bedridden, barely able to eat anything, barely able to step out of the apartment. Compounding that is a new job that's been pretty stressful, not what I had in mind, really. A bit below my pay grade, even though the pay is good. So it hasn't been fulfilling for me personally. And then the social isolation factor, I think, factors in a lot too, where this is her first time leaving her home country. She's sort of Russian Ukrainian, and for me, I've been traveling my whole life, so this is just another notch of where to go. Again, another place to work. So she's been isolated from friends and family, and there isn't always a ton of things that we enjoy doing around the city. It's sort of a small city. The big happening place, Shanghai, is a few hours away, and we can't always afford to make the trip there. So it's isolated in all those respects. And so when I come home, after that, I want to spend time because, like you've mentioned in previously in so many places, that the real job happens when you step into the home, and I really like that sentiment. But then I don't know how to exactly perform there well and how to make sure that she's enjoying her time, given all the things that I've just described. So I don't know, is it a lifestyle thing that I need to change, or is it just something that we have to just, bite the bullet and sort of weather this period in our relationship? I don't know if you have thoughts or suggestions on how we can make sure that our evening times aren't boring, and we don't over rely on each other perhaps for socializing because of the social isolation. Those are all things that come to mind. If we need to drill down somewhere more specific, I'm happy to do so.
How is she feeling about the situation when you talk to her about it?
Yeah, well, I would say it was a pretty rocky experience in the beginning because having being hit with all of those factors at the same time, especially the morning sickness, And I got a little bit rattled off of my own center, I would say, and starting to get emotionally needy too, because here I am supposedly providing, doing everything I can, and I'm not getting a ton of emotional support or validation back from her because she's in this tough spot. So I'm thinking, okay, is she just completely losing interest in me now? Is she regretting it? And we've had some tough conversations a few months back, and where she kind of said in so many words, it wasn't worth it being married and to me and going out here. So that really was a punch to the gut. But since then, I've been trying to be strategic and talk to her and make sure that I'm aware of this and trying to find ways out of this. She feels, I guess, kind of bored and isolated, I would say, although she's a bit of a trooper and lately she's been shouldering it pretty well. We've been now making trips to Shanghai, and we found a parish there that we can go to, and some Russian-speaking folks there. So, we're slowly building because we've only been there for a few months now. We're slowly building a life that maybe is more livable, but it's still, it's still there. So I'm sure she could weather the storm. She could handle it. It's just not optimal. And I'm worried that it's putting a lot of pressure on us and how we relate to each other and how much we value each other's time because of that.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah.
And the main reason for you
Mhm.
being here is to do with the job,
Mhm.
right? You move for the
Correct.
money.
Yep, I moved for the money. It was a financial call, and it's the best paying gig that I've been able to find. I'm an English professor, so higher education teaching, and the job market. I'm sure you have some acquaintance with how it is. It's pretty atrocious in most places in the West, especially. And here in China, they pay pretty well, but it ends up being a kind of you're mostly teaching English as a second language. You're not really doing any highfalutin literature. So
That's
yes,
okay though, right? Because
it
the
is.
the
Yeah,
point of
yeah,
the job is just to pay the bills and provide
right.
financially. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
emotionally fulfilling for you.
That's
If
good to know.
you
Hmm.
want to get in touch with some of that stuff that you want to talk about, but
Yeah.
aren't really doing as part of your paid job,
Hmm. Hmm.
write a blog, right?
Yeah. 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 That's good.
Yep.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
let go of that idea.
Got it.
You're doing
Hmm.
it so you get paid, and you
Makes
should
sense.
be grateful for that. I can detect a little bit of resentment in your attitude to the work. Be grateful for the fact that it pays well,
Hmm. Hmm.
okay? And that will change the way that she feels
Hmm.
around you as well. If you're
Hmm.
dragging your feet and moping because you don't
Hmm.
get to
Hmm.
talk about Shakespeare enough, then
Hmm. Hmm.
it's not going to go well between the two of you because she will sense that. And that's a form of complaining.
Right.
So gratitude for the salary. You move for the salary. Now, the
Hmm.
next thing going on is that she hasn't got any friends in the area, as far as I can tell,
Yeah. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So you need to
Hmm.
lead socially there in forging those connections.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Have a look at where your habits week to week are taking you. Are you
Hmm.
meeting other young couples? Is she going to
Hmm.
have, based on your current calendar activity week to week, is she
Hmm.
going to have a good
Hmm.
social circle in this area within the next sort of 6 months or so?
Hmm.
Especially when the baby's born, she's going to need to have other young moms to talk to, ideally,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
You have to be the one who leads in that as well. Go up,
Hmm.
shake hands with some of the other young husbands, fathers,
Yeah.
take the initiative.
Hmm.
So that's outside of your apartment. You mentioned that you're making
Hmm.
some connections to a parish in Shanghai, right?
Yeah, neighboring city. It's a few hours away by high speed train. So that would be maybe like a once every couple of weeks kind of deal, right?
Right.
So that's
You want
something.
something
Yeah.
closer to home as well. Find something
Hmm.
actually in the city you're in,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, you're right.
Meet more people there. You won't be
Hmm.
the only Christians,
Hmm. 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 That's helpful just to know that really ought to be taking initiative there. That's been a weak point for me because prior to our marriage, I'm very much a lone wolf kind of guy. I can be happy with myself being a homebody with my books, and I know that's not very just by itself, not probably not the most masculine kind of inclination to have to want to be at home. But then also, I can entertain myself quite easily, whereas I understand that's not it's not something that she's getting out of the experience. She does need social connections.
Yeah.
She's been relying on obviously she still has some friends in back in her home country, and so she's been texting them. She's been sometimes getting on video calls with them. I'm guessing your point would be that's not going to substitute for face to face. So makes sense. I'll see what I can do. It's a cultural and a language barrier in the sense that there's not a ton of she doesn't even speak English, right? So her and I we speak in Russian together, and she's been trying to pick up the language, at least English, not Chinese. We haven't gotten that far yet, but so there's a bit of a struggle in finding people who can speak her language. So I got
Hmm.
that working against me, but not impossible, especially with this parish that we found and even I think with some of the local colleagues, I could find, someone that she can practice English with, for example. That could be both useful and hopefully a form of socializing for her too. But I hear you. I gotta do more, and I gotta be more strategic about how to solve this problem on a weekly basis, and not just hope that it'll solve itself. So
No, it won't solve itself.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
leave it alone, it will just steadily get worse.
yeah, yeah. Makes
And
sense. Makes
and
sense.
then with the time you spend together in the
Hmm.
apartment,
Hmm.
uh, what does she enjoy?
Right. It's interesting because the way that I've learned about her life prior to us being married is, yeah, I mean, I would say she really enjoys socializing. She has a big family. She has seven brothers and sisters. So big family, and that's sort of the vibe that she's grown up. She grew up in. So she likes getting together with those people. And what else? I mean, she's in the past, now she's pregnant, so that's not going to be on the table, but she would go, snowboarding. So she kind of liked those sorts of things, sort of like interesting, slightly adrenaline inducing sports or activities. Now with the pregnancy, that's, a little tricky to envision what that would look like. But other than that, I'll have to think about, I mean, she does occasionally like to read, but I prefer to find a way to get her out of the house sometimes, right? I feel like just being in the apartment by itself is probably a bit much for her day in and day out.
Hmm.
So, uh, so yeah, we're not big on movies. We don't like to sit around and watch TV or anything like that. So I would say that she probably likes to see new sights and maybe occasionally do things that are at least lightly physical, given her condition now. Um, so I could try to strategize on that front.
Well, how many
Um,
months pregnant is she?
so she's just kicking off the start of her second trimester, or she's 1 week into her second. So just somewhere in the halfway mark, I would say. I don't have the
Right.
numbers in front of me,
Yeah.
but
Well, there's
yeah,
plenty of stuff that's physical that she can do all the way through, but stuff
right.
like
Mhm.
going to the gym with you, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Does she like doing that?
That's actually, I think it was our second date idea was me walking her through a gym session. So she's a fan of that for sure. I
Okay.
think
Right. Well, that's good for her mood too and overall
yeah,
mental health.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're not currently exercising with her regularly and getting her out of the apartment and into a
Hmm.
gym, then
Hmm.
you should definitely start doing that and make that a
Hmm.
schedule so you'll
Hmm.
both
Hmm.
stick to it and keep it going. That will be
Hmm.
important. And then
Yeah.
if there are any things in your city or a neighboring city that you think she would
Hmm.
like, museum, art gallery, just go
Hmm.
on a
Hmm.
tour of some of the buildings,
Hmm.
learn more about the history of the place. If that's the kind of thing she'd be interested in, those could be great date ideas too.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. There's definitely we haven't because of busyness with everything, we haven't made enough time to just get to know the surroundings as much. I think we haven't been out as much as we could be, and I know that there are some hiking trails. There's things like that we could easily explore. So, right now we're outside of China, but when we come back from our vacation, I'll definitely be
Hmm.
on the ball on that front and try to dig around and find some interesting spots for us to spend quality time in. So that's good. That makes sense. Both of those
Right.
things, especially the social thing. I haven't been doing enough there. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you haven't been out and about much because you've been very busy with things.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Is that busy with work?
Hmm. It's work, and then it's a side hustle that I have, and it's some of the creative work that I do on the side to for my own personal fulfillment. So those are three things, three hats that I end up wearing that take up
Hmm.
most of my time outside of our family time together.
Right.
Um,
Do you
so I
think
try
you have
to.
enough family time together?
That's a good question. I actually there have been stretches of time where I felt almost I don't know how much of this is my anxiety though, or almost like I've been too available. Or again, this could be it's hard to suss out what's actual and what's my impressions and my own insecurities. But sometimes just being at home and like our quality time, or like she's not really into the conversation. Maybe she's not satisfied because of all the other factors we mentioned of not having enough people to socialize with and being a bit bored. And I start to kind of take it personally, or like she's bored with me, or I'm not interesting enough to be around. It's gone to the point sometimes not so severe now that we've been doing new things, but sometimes we're like, well, I don't want to, scarcity creates value, as they say in the red pill. Like maybe I'm just too available, and that's why she's not appreciating our time together. So I would say it's a bit of a mixed bag. I don't know if I spend enough time or if I'm almost too much around the house and not doing enough things that are fresh or new because of that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
But
so I don't know if you have a sense of what it might be, but
it
um,
seems like you're just quite passive in how you spend time with her. You don't really
that
have much of
could
a
be.
plan about what you want to do.
Hmm. Hmm. It could be true. Yeah, yeah. And I do make the deliberate effort to do dates, or, we have our Sunday as a ritual of ours. We always do something. We go out somewhere on Sunday and do something fresh or new, or take her out on a date somewhere, or go to a restaurant or something.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's the weekdays, it's the weeknights rather that sort of just accrue, and I can't necessarily afford to do fun and exciting things on every weeknight, right?
Hmm.
So
Well,
yeah.
do you think she wants to go out every single weeknight?
Probably not. Probably not. I think that's probably a bit of my anxiety percolating in the back of my mind, where I feel like I have to perform to keep her interested and excited and invested in the relationship, and not, because maybe a bit of that passivity is just there lurking, in a blind spot of mine, where I'm just okay with being around the house and sort of, maybe that's just maybe I ought to be a bit tighter with how I schedule even the evening times too. I'm not sure really where I stand there.
Well,
Um, mhm,
talk to her.
mhm,
Communication's always going to be important.
mhm,
So
mhm.
ask her how she's feeling about the next month of weeknights
Mm.
that you guys are
Yeah.
facing.
Hmm.
When you think
Hmm.
about what kind of memories you want to build together,
Hmm. Hmm.
what's a good way to spend those? Maybe you could every Wednesday go out and do something together
Right.
in the
Hmm.
city. Maybe you could do the gym together
Hmm.
a couple of
Hmm.
nights a week. Then you got
Yeah.
your Sunday regular date activity. That
Hmm.
sounds like a pretty good mixture.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think being more intentional about in the middle of the week would work. Um, We do have our workouts occasionally. Occasionally they line up and occasionally not, because then she gets hit with a bout of nausea or something with her morning sickness, and she's not out of commission for that day. Or,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think it's just some sort of shared activity that her and I could agree on, that would be fun for her as well. That we could something creative that we could do together. Yeah. So
Yep.
great.
And if you don't know what those activities are, then it's time
Mhm.
for a conversation with her.
Makes
Pull up your
sense.
phone, search, see what's available in your area,
Right.
and just
Mhm.
make a list of, 10 things, 20 things that
Mhm.
would be fun to do together. Have some
Mhm.
that are outside your apartment and also have
Mhm.
some things that you actually want to do together. Some people like playing board games, other
Yeah.
people like reading together,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Maybe she likes to draw, paint,
Mhm.
play an
Mhm.
instrument.
Mhm. Oh, those are good. Those are good. Good. So good brainstorming session. Yeah. Sometimes I think that's great. I mean, I like that. I think you've said this in previous conversations too, or just like sometimes you. It sounds so silly to say this, but you surprise me with how direct I can actually be in the communication. Because I do sometimes I want to solve it myself, and I don't want to feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. So wife, tell me, how can I take care of you? I'd rather be like, let me figure it out myself. And because of that, maybe I don't always have those direct conversations I could be having that would make my life easier. So, uh, well, that's encouraging that's something that you would prescribe in this case too. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's just talking to your wife. It's like
mhm,
basic
mhm.
marriage skill is
Yeah,
connecting.
yeah,
So just
yeah, yeah.
talking to her about
Mhm.
always how is she feeling about
Right.
being away from her big family with all her
Mhm.
siblings and so much
Yeah,
busyness all around her and
yeah,
people speaking her language, literally. And
yeah,
now
yeah.
she's not around any of that. Like,
Mhm,
how is she feeling?
mhm,
Often,
mhm,
even the first answer, okay. And is that getting worse recently? Has it been getting better? Ask a
mhm,
few more questions. Get down beneath the surface answer. You need to
mhm,
really make sure you're always aware of how that's developing because it could
mhm.
get pretty bad pretty quickly, especially after the birth of the baby when things become more stressful and
Yeah.
then hormones can be difficult as well. You really
Mhm,
need to make sure that connection on this topic is strong.
mhm, mhm. That makes sense. I guess this is a good transition to an idea of yours that I really like and am realizing that I would like to implement more intentionally or consciously, which is this idea of a shared story, and of her, buying into and being compelled by that shared story. I've put it differently in my own terms, or thinking of like the family as its own little cult, but cult is not necessarily what we don't want to be, deviating from like church doctrine in any sense or having our own little spirituality of our own, but to think of it as a kind of its own sacred space with its own clear vision of how things unfold, its own goals, its own story. And I'm wondering if I'm being proactive enough on that front, because I know that passivity, it's a problem that I've struggled with in the past, and to some extent probably still do. And I know a lot of people, a lot of men in particular, kind of take the back seat where they could be more proactive. And I'm just wondering if you have general suggestions about how to achieve that kind of an atmosphere in your family where the wife feels like she is part of this, she's on this ride towards this great thing, and that you're building together, and that there is a compelling story. What do you think are the story components that you could recommend, or just strategies of how to establish that? Where does it trickle down from? As a man, what can I do to make that story compelling? I don't know if you have general remarks or suggestions on that front, because I do find that a helpful framework for thinking
Mhm.
about the relationship. And anytime I have implemented it, I could tell that she gets the spark in her eye. And she's, ooh, I'm moving towards something. I'm setting some boundaries. I'm like charting this towards some new territory. And that gets her excited. But like, am I doing that enough? Am I proactive enough? Is there something I could be doing more? I don't
Mhm.
know. Mm.
Well,
Mhm.
it trickles down from the man. So
Mhm.
you need to know what your marriage is about,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So what is it about?
Mhm. Uh, I would say, ever since I came to the faith, because I've been an atheist in my past life, I would say, and I would say I definitely believe very strongly in an afterlife, and I think that this is a sort of a crucible or a threshing ground or a transition to something bigger and perhaps even more important. And so I do think that I want to be prepared. I want to be prepared for the judgment day. I want to feel like nothing was missed, that every bit of potential has been squeezed out. And I would like my wife to also be just as passionate about doing as much good as we can within the family and out of the family. And creative expression, I think, is a big part because I'm an artsy kind of guy. And I kind of am trying to also stir the flames in her and try to, you mentioned drawing. She's been trying to dabble a little bit in that. I've been trying to find other things for her to explore, because she's always been working, and this is her first, taste at, being a stay-at-home wife and then a mother eventually. So I'm trying to not lose her to the daily routines of things, and to help her find something where she can express herself creatively, whatever way she wants to. So I find, yeah, those are some aspects of my vision, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So a couple of things
mhm,
I heard there is that
mhm,
suffering is a big part of life, right? If we're
Hmm.
on earth partly to be, well, mainly to be transformed into saints so we are worthy of heaven,
Hmm.
suffering is going to be a touchstone in your marriage too.
Hmm.
So if you're going through a tough time, whether it's financially or socially, whatever it could be, then
Hmm.
she needs to recognize that that might not be something that you two want to run away from.
Hmm.
You can
Hmm.
actually benefit from it. So if things are tough for the reasons you've been outlining,
Yeah.
then part of the story is that when things get difficult like this, we don't
Hmm.
wish it away,
Hmm.
right? We're
Hmm.
able to savor it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe it means that the only date you can afford is just a coffee date, but that's
Hmm.
still really beautiful. And you'll be
Hmm.
able to look back on that in 10, 15, 20 years. And
Hmm.
that might be some of the most beautiful memories that you have together.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, that's an example of how what might seem kind of
Hmm.
miserable at one
Hmm.
moment in
Hmm.
the story, when you're
Hmm.
viewing it overall,
Hmm.
it's actually great. What you're going through with her right now is great, and you can both grow from it.
Hmm. That's helpful, and I like that you highlighted suffering in particular. That was a bit absent in my account, but
Well, you talked about life being a crucible and like a
yeah, no, you're
threshing
right.
ground, and that's what it
Yeah,
is. That's what suffering does.
yeah, yeah. And the reason I find that helpful is because when this whole train, hit us with this sort of perfect storm where she's isolated, no one to speak to, she's going through these horrible, like, throwing up every day, can't hold down food, all, the works, everything. Um, it was hard for me to know to what extent am I there to empathize with her and hold space, and to what extent do I reframe or try to reframe her experience, and this is actually a good thing. And that was really tough because I would sort of just kind of sink down into the abyss with her a little bit rather than pull her up and give her something that, reframe it in a way that was compelling to her. It was really tough to do because I had a lot working against me in that story.
Mm.
But you're right that that ended up, I think, because we're in a better place now, and it ended up strengthening things. So
Yeah.
so I
So just
think,
a simple, this will be worth it, right? I
yeah,
I know
yeah,
this
yeah,
is tough, but it's so worth it
right,
because we're
right.
starting our family together,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
That's critical because, yeah, I have a tendency, I'm kind of empathetic sometimes to a fault. And I have to remember that I'm actually the one setting the tone, and I have to take charge of this and be and remind us that we're headed somewhere. We're not just wallowing in our emotions together. So
Mm.
that's a helpful reframe. Just even being the storyteller or being in charge of the family story, I think, is super, super helpful. Okay. There's a few other things I'd really like to pick your brain on and get your advice about. I want to respect your time, so I don't know if maybe there's one more topic we could tackle, or we'll
Yeah,
see.
go for it. Let's see
Mhm.
how many we can get
Sure.
through.
Cool. This one's way more hands-on practical. This is financial stuff. But like you said earlier before we started, it probably does connect to the story, connects to providing her emotional experiences because that does take money. So the financial situation I'm in, I'd just like to get your overall diagnostic of where I'm at, and what you would do in my situation. Probably out of everything is the one with most of the warning signals, klaxons going off, because everything else I think is manageable, but this is a bit on the tougher side. And because I'm young, I'm new to this. This is my first time actually really earning enough to get by, to make savings, and having to be financially responsible, no longer just for myself but also for family. So maybe I'll give you a quick rundown of what the situation is looking like financially, and what you would do given that, and given what our goals are for the future. Understanding that, ultimately I could also consult a financial advisor, but you have more experience here either way. You might notice things I won't. So um, basically, so I've got a debt situation that I'm coming out of. I had to pay for the wedding and the trips and the planes, and I had not too many savings to speak of, but not too much prior to the marriage, so the wedding ceremony and everything. So I'm in debt because of that, and also in student debt. And if you add up everything, around, I would say, 40,000 Canadian, which I think is 30,000 US, in debt. I've just started earning, so I have not very little savings to speak of. And I currently make a pretty good amount. I would say in Canadian about 5,000 a month, but that's only 9 months out of the year. So and that's the situation. I really got to be probably I would imagine I have to be aggressive with the debt repayment. But we have other expenses in terms of this year, particularly with we're taking this trip because I gave her my word that in January we would go back to Russia so that she can actually have a bit of a breather, see her family again. So that's where we're currently at. And then we also want to give eventually to give birth to the child also here on home turf for her, and that would be sometime in June. So that's another trip that we're planning. All of these are expenses, and so then there's everything related to the kid being born in June this year as well. You know, from the baby crib to the carriage to everything in between. Um, and so that's the situation. Not too many savings, tons of debt. Currently, just making enough to afford these expenses, and maybe have other suggestions about how I could trim and save more. But it's not. I guess I'm a little bit concerned that even though I'm earning, more than I ever have, and I feel good about the income, it's I'm not making a dent yet. At least in the next until the end of summer in my debts, not as aggressively as I would like, and I'm not really making as many savings because of all the expenses listed. I don't know if there's something you would recommend, or if am I thinking too short term if I'm being anxious about that, and is this can I eventually rebudget things? I'm worried that I have a tendency to spend, like I'm not being mindful enough of the debt or something, because I'm not, like I said, making a dent in it as much as I would like for the next 6 months out. Or given the fact that it's a child being born and there's these expenses with travel, that I should just sort of be okay with that until I can eventually turn the ship around, get more aggressive with debt repayment, get more aggressive with savings. I don't know. That's the lay of the land right now. If you have thoughts that come to mind when you hear the situation, I'd love to hear them.
So personal finance is personal and it's all
Yes.
about your priorities. So you need
Hmm.
to figure out what those are.
Hmm.
With the
Hmm.
debt, rank it in terms of which debt is currently incurring the highest interest.
Right,
If
right.
all the debt is interest free,
Hmm.
maybe don't worry about it too much right now. What is
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
situation with your debt?
With interest, there's two, I would say, well, maybe a third, or roughly half or a third is interest, and then the other half or two-thirds is non-interest.
Okay.
So
So the
yeah.
debt that has no interest on, I would
Hmm.
not worry about that. Just ignore it for now. Okay.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Now,
Makes
the
sense.
debt that is highest interest,
Hmm.
if you can pay that off
Hmm.
sooner, obviously it's going to work out better for you,
Hmm.
but it
Hmm.
still might not be your top priority,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
So have a look at it and think about, is it truly worth it to you for
Hmm.
peace of mind or whatever? Or
Hmm.
depends how much the interest will work out being.
Hmm.
Do you really want to pay it earlier? Or is it more important to you to prioritize having a few more date nights that cost a bit more money or being
Hmm.
able to increase her quality of life right now?
Hmm. Hmm.
Trade
Hmm.
off, right? And it
Hmm.
might not be worth paying off the debt, or it might be. You have to look at it and decide.
Hmm. Hmm.
With the travel back to Russia and
Hmm.
also the costs of the new baby being born,
Right.
you should know with a pretty good degree of accuracy exactly how much all that is going to cost and
Hmm.
when you're going to have to pay for it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
just get that figure and
Hmm.
then divide it over the number of months between now and then and
Hmm.
say, that's how much I need to put aside each month so that I
Hmm.
can cover those expenses when the time comes.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Now,
Makes sense. Mhm.
you should be able to do that right
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
And again, that should reduce some of the anxiety.
Mhm. Mhm.
With your actual monthly regular expenses, all
Mhm.
the fixed costs, the
Mhm.
necessities, uh,
Mhm.
how much money do you have left over each month? After all those have gone out, what's
Mhm.
left? So after the necessities have been paid for.
Mhm. Mhm. So it's I've been tracking expenses for the past 2 months because I've only been working since at this place since November and only started tracking expenses and everything for the past 2 months basically. It's been an irregular month because of the expenses related to travel. But if I'm just trying to isolate like living expenses. Thankfully, living accommodations is covered, which is huge for us. That's how we're able to save. The institution I work in was able to cover that. But so there's food would be the big one. And I mean, if I'm looking at my what I've budgeted so far, it's looking pretty good in terms of, I think savings is maybe uh roughly 20% or so on a regular month, not reflective of what we've been doing so far because of everything else. But
Okay. So
yeah.
your only
Mhm.
necessity, right, at the moment is food. No accommodation costs.
Accommodations is covered. There's food. There's travel. So
Yep.
getting around the city, transportation.
Yep.
Um, and as far as like necessities, so not like wants or preferences, then I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
It's
So just food and then travel to and from work.
pretty much, yeah. Hmm.
Right. And that leaves you with what amount in at the
So let
end
me
of each
take a look
month?
here. Yeah, yeah, I'll break it down. So food, yeah, I mean, you're right when it comes to money being, a show of your priorities, because I'm a bit of a health freak and, I'm very much concerned about the quality of the food, especially with my pregnant wife. But it's so we got like, 1,200 a month of these are Canadian dollars, um, spent on food. We try to get, decent food on the table. There's not a ton of selection here always in the city that we live in. So you have to go to kind of highly priced, or food grocery stores and things like that. That's what I'm looking at right now. And then the income is looking at about 5K. Um, uh, yeah, so that's what I'm seeing. And I have a minimum debt payment. So I guess that would be a necessity too, is there's a certain amount of debt I have to pay every month. There's the amount that I would like to pay off if I were more aggressive with it. But then there's the minimum amount, which I would class as necessity, perhaps. Just that the credit score doesn't tank and I don't have future problems. But
Okay.
yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now. Transportation is maybe $100 Canadian a
Okay.
month.
So
Yeah.
what's the actual amount you have left over after transportation and food?
Uh, if we're just cutting it down to that, I'm looking at just around a 3,000, upward of 3,000, 3,500-ish, maybe a bit more than that. Mhm.
Okay. And then we take the minimum debt payments off that.
Mhm. So that would end up being, we're looking at about 300 for one card. So a total of about 800-ish dollars. So that would end up being 2,000 600-ish
Okay.
after the minimum payment. Yeah. Mhm.
Right. So you're in a
Mhm.
much better financial situation than most people.
That's true.
You're
Yeah.
able to, after all necessities, save
Hmm.
about $2,500 a month.
Right.
Right. That's
Hmm.
about half your paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
So you can save all of that. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or you can say, well, some of that money
Hmm.
really, I think is worth spending on some
Hmm.
nice experiences with my
Hmm.
wife. So we're building some memories together.
Hmm.
So up to you. But
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
plenty of money to work with.
Hmm.
Now, maybe you can cut your food bill slightly.
Yeah.
You
Hmm.
seem like a relatively highly strung, anxious guy to me. And I think
Fair.
that probably expresses itself in your food
Hmm.
habits too.
Yeah.
And a lot
Hmm.
of what you're spending your money on there is
Hmm.
probably majoring in the minors. Like it probably
Hmm.
has a negligible impact on your
Hmm.
health and hers. Now, if
Hmm.
it's still worth it to you,
Hmm.
then go for it, right? It's your money.
Hmm.
It's about what you value. But if
Hmm.
you've got higher priorities, and
Hmm.
if the reduction in your stress or the improvement in her mood from
Hmm.
taking some of that food money and spending it on having more fun together would be worth it,
Hmm.
do that
Hmm.
instead.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if that's your financial situation, then I don't think you should be too worried about it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Plenty of
Yeah.
money there to save monthly, plenty
Hmm.
of money to be able to afford a child too, plenty of
Hmm.
money to be able to afford probably more regular trips back to Russia,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
that might be a smart thing to spend money on.
You're right.
Have a look at how much it would cost to go back 4 times a year, right?
Yeah.
And you've got those 3 months
Hmm.
where you're not working each year, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So.
take your total disposable income then
Hmm.
over the
Hmm.
whole year and then think, how much do you want to go back so she can see her family? If I
Hmm.
were you, that's
Hmm.
where I think the smart place to spend money would be.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea because I guess a related problem would be the fact of, how like our life satisfaction, the pay is, it's astronomically better than anything we've ever seen. And I'm glad that you've reframed it where I'm not looking for job satisfaction here because that puts some of my concerns at ease. Um, but then quality of life in terms of okay, we're staying in China. Neither of us like it here very much, at least not in the city that we live in, and there's not a ton of people for us to connect with and all the rest. So I'm thinking, okay, do I look for another job elsewhere? Do I apply to one of the Russian speaking countries like Kazakhstan or I used to live there, so I have some experience there, or do I stay here because of the pay?
Well, what
And
are your
and
goals?
yeah, well, our goals are eventually to we want to settle, we want to work for some time abroad to make savings, and then we want to because typically what they do is they'll cover living expenses as they do here, and that's a good way to make a little bit of money on the side, and then we want to eventually. I said roughly in 5 years' time. I don't know how realistic that is, but to eventually land in Russia and start sort of homesteading there, purchase a little bit of land, and hopefully maybe even engage in a house construction project of some kind and sort of build up our territory there, our home base there. But we need to save some money first because we're starting in the negative right now with my debt. We want to crawl ourselves out of that first.
Okay.
But the thing is for her is like for her thinking that she's going to be in China for 5 years is a big ask. So I'm not on the one hand, I'm thinking of looking at other places, but what you mentioned just now is helpful. If I can just make it work financially for her to come to Russia more often, that could alleviate a lot of the pressure.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you
so,
can. You
mhm,
can.
yeah.
You have the
Hmm.
financial means to do that. What
Hmm.
you should
Hmm.
do is just keep that goal the goal then, which is the homestead, and
Hmm.
just map out month to month how long
Hmm.
it's going to take you to get
Hmm.
there. So if you're
Hmm.
able to save, let's say 2 to 2.5K per month
Hmm.
towards that,
Hmm.
at what point is all the debt with interest that you really want to prioritize paying off going to be cleared? Have
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
as like a big checkpoint on your timeline,
Right.
reminder of it. That's what we're working towards. Have a big
Hmm.
celebration when you get there. Take her out for a nice dinner. Okay, after that debt is paid off, what's the
Hmm.
next thing?
Hmm.
Maybe it's going to be when you get, 40K saved up, something like
Hmm.
that. It won't take you that long. If you're doing
Hmm.
2.5K a month, this is going to happen quite quickly. Like
Hmm.
you'll get there
Hmm.
within a year or two. And then
Hmm.
next thing might be, okay, we want double that. I'm not sure how
Hmm.
much money this homestead you've got in mind is
Right.
going to cost
Hmm.
you. Depends on the size, right? But you
Hmm.
should know all these figures and how long it's going to take to get
Yeah.
there. And then
Hmm.
that's going to make having to be in this situation for her make so
Yeah.
much more sense because she knows what it's
Hmm.
actually about. And also,
Hmm.
it's a lot easier for her to endure if you've accounted for the cost of going back to Russia regularly.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And now I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking of doing something because like I said, creative guy. I could do something like a dream board or something, set something up on the wall where I make it visually clear. This is where we're
Yeah.
headed. Put something kind of gamify it, but also make it something visually appealing so that we have the literal dream that we're aiming at in front of us somewhere as a reminder.
Yeah. Make the
Um,
spreadsheet first, right? Crunch the numbers
yeah,
first, and
right,
then
right.
turn it into something cool that goes on the wall. And
Nice.
if you combine that, which is like the big picture narrative of what you
Yeah.
are here for and what you are trying to
Hmm.
achieve, with
Hmm.
some of the small things like the midweek date and
Hmm.
you taking some of that money, which is quite
Hmm.
a large amount. Like a lot of guys who are earning six figures don't have
Hmm.
that amount disposable if they're living in Canada, for example. Okay.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Um, you have quite a lot of money there to be able to do various things that you think are important with. Money talks, shows her what
Hmm.
you value.
Hmm.
So if she likes going to Shanghai and likes going out to a nice restaurant or going to see something in the theater or anything like that,
Hmm.
that would be money wisely spent, okay?
Hmm.
Because it would help to alleviate some of the pressure of being in this
Yeah.
place that is
Yeah.
difficult for her in all kinds of ways.
Hmm. Hmm.
So allocate funds for that, for the more frequent trips, and then just
Hmm.
map out how long it takes to get to all these different things that you want to achieve. And
Hmm.
here is where you probably should talk to a financial advisor as well about the
Yeah.
debt, about the cost of the homestead, and all the
Right.
rest of it. And say,
Hmm.
here's what I want to get to.
Hmm.
What do
Hmm.
you have to suggest about this plan I put in place? See what they
Hmm.
say.
Hmm. Great. Great. That's helpful. Very practical and things I can go back and review and start to implement right away. So that's great.
Okay,
Um,
good
you
stuff.
know, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thanks for sharing your thoughts, and I'm keen to hear a bit more about how this situation unfolds. Definitely be more proactive in all the areas that we've
Yeah.
described, and I think you'll notice a big improvement in how she responds, not just to you, but to
Mhm.
being in this situation at all.
Mhm. Mhm. I appreciate it, Will. Thanks for making the time. I always get
You're
a lot out of
welcome.
these podcasts, even just as a listener. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Take care.